When asked about things that determine health and illness, people will usually directly answer either individual lifestyle or genetics. The question is, are health and illness really that simple to just be affected by those two things? Of course, the answer is no. In the past, and even in the Western societies today, there was indeed view of health being affected only by physiological body. This is called the medical view of health. However, it is criticized for being too narrow and ignorant toward determinants other than physical factors. And this is why the social model or social view of health emerges, considering a broader range of factors from cultural, social, economics, physiological, psychological, and even environmental and the common people's perspectives. The Rainbow Model of Social Determinants of Health by Dahlgren and Whitehead 1991 is one that portrays the social model very well. It illustrates a causal relationship between each determinant of health, from the most proximal factor at its core to the most distal factor at its outer ring. It involves individual factors, lifestyle, society and community networks, living and working conditions, as well as the general political, cultural, and environmental conditions. We're going to take a deeper look at culture. How does culture affect health and illness? This might align to social constructionist view that states every reality in the world, including health, is socially constructed and based on what humans decided to be. We all live in different societies, which also means different cultures. And this culture that makes differences in people's health and illness across different places, and how they perceive health, behave toward health, and treat themselves to achieve health or cure illness. But how exactly does it work? Today we will find out more about that. Let's start by looking at what health is. There are two main streams of defining health, the positive and negative approach. The negative approach is what people used to think about health, defining health only as the absence of disease or abnormality. However, the positive approach critiques the negative approach as being too shallow because according to the positive approach, health is not only about having no illnesses, but also about well-being and assets that humans possess. The latter is the one adopted by World Health Organization 1948 to define health as a state of complete physical, mental, and social well-being, and not merely the absence of disease and infirmity. Today, this is the most widely used version of health definition. How about culture? What is culture? Corey 1995 defines culture as a system of meanings and symbols that influence and shape the way people view and define the social world. Rather than relying on experts' opinions alone, culture allows seeing health from the lay perspectives, or the paradigm of local people. Social anthropologists say that health beliefs, understandings, and practices are influenced by cultural context either in a positive or negative way. We might not realize how the process goes since culture has been embedded in us, but it indeed molds how people perceive, behave, and feel toward their health and illness, including the health-related governance in a society. In the Rainbow Model, culture serves as the most distal factor, but there is interconnectedness between culture and the more proximal factors. There are interactions that will then affect people's health and illness. Culture strongly affects people's perception of health and illnesses. For example, in Southeast Asian countries, mental illnesses are perceived as a consequence of being possessed by the evil or lack of spiritual practices, whereas in Western countries, they blame it on neurological or psychological factors. Perception of health and illnesses will surely be manifested through health-related behaviors, which are covered in the individual lifestyle factor in the Rainbow Model. For instance, in the UK, USA, Korea, China, and many other countries, alcohol drinking culture is perceived as socialization process. This principle drives the health-damaging behavior of drinking, which then could lead to chronic diseases. However, the habit remains in the society for its cultural value, despite people knowing that it is bad. In other parts of the world, alcohol drinking culture is socially banned due to belief restrictions. So we can see that the same health-related behavior is enhanced in one society but also rejected in another society based on its cultural differences. This then could lead to contrasting lifestyle and health outcomes. Other than lifestyle, culture also connects to other factors in the rainbow model in influencing health perception and behavior. It is correlated to human constitutional factor at the model's core. In a malaria case study in Africa by Label 2003, culture is found to shape different roles between genders. According to the culture, men are not the only ones working to grow crops. Women also own lands to help feeding their families. The increasing job of women working on their lands makes them fail to identify illness symptoms quickly. Therefore, the prevalence of malaria is getting higher and higher. Culture also alters health through the work environment factor in the model. Remote working culture, the one that became very popular after the pandemic COVID-19, increases working time and exposure to technology, but decreases physical mobility at the same time. This could cause physical and mental health issues such as fatigue, headache, cardiovascular diseases, anxiety, and burnout. Another factor that mediates health and culture is education. For example, in many societies in Indonesia, talking about sex is still considered as taboo. Therefore, the kind of sex education is different from the one provided in the Western countries. While contraception is included in Western sex education, it is not much discussed in Indonesia sex education to prevent youth from using it to have sex outside marriage, or just because talking about sex activity is seen as not appropriate. However, when people become adults, lack of knowledge about contraception creates a higher possibility for unintended pregnancies, which then becomes detrimental for women's health. Another important point is the way culture shapes how people are expected to respond toward illness or events that potentially cause illness. Research by Ethan 2010 about the tsunami in Sri Lanka shows that although the Western professionals expect the local people to have PTSD or post-traumatic trauma disorder after the experience, the reality was completely different. The locals are not drowned into trauma because their spiritual and cultural traditions build a sense of resilience in terms of hardships in comparison to Western culture that emphasizes more on rational and scientific values rather than cultural beliefs. Tsai et al. 2018 in their study about autism finds that parents in the UK are more open with autism. Therefore, they expect their autistic children to live as normal people. On the contrary, Taiwanese tend to give special treatment to their autistic children and tells the siblings to not openly talk about their autistic sibling in public. Instead of making expectations for the autistic children, they expect the siblings to automatically be responsible and understanding toward their family conditions. This cannot be separated from the social and community networks in the model. The fact that disability in Taiwan is still stigmatized and do not receive much support from relatives compared to the UK. Language is also a part of culture that plays a central role in health and illness. For example, in the autism study, it's found that those who have autism prefer the word autistic people rather than people with autism, like how we say Indonesian people and not people with Indonesian, because the term autistic people encourage their identity and accentuate stigma. The differences of expectation toward illness between different cultures will in turn affect the choice of treatment. Healthcare service is one of the most prominent factors affected by culture among many other factors present in the rainbow model. One evidence is while developed countries rely on biomedicine treatment when facing physical illnesses, Southeast Asian countries choose to maintain their traditional treatment as their first choice, for example with the use of herbal medicine or traditional massage. Culture is also responsible for mental illnesses treatments. In countries that link mental disorders with spiritual related causes, spiritual therapy will be considered in the first place. We cannot generalize what kind of treatment should be provided in every country. In the Sri Lanka case study, there is concern that forcing Western treatment of mental therapy to the Sri Lankan, which is by separating individuals to take private healing sessions, could instead result in the opposite direction of what was expected. It is because the locals are shaped to believe in shared suffering and that community support serves as a source of healing. It is clear evidence that what best in one community might not work or even be detrimental to other communities. So, looking at how culture plays a huge role in determining people's perception, behavior, and treatment toward health and illnesses, it is very important to take culture into account for every decision making regarding health policies and services. Forcing a way of treatment everywhere all at once might become destructive, and it would be best if research and treatment provision are centered on local values so that people can benefit from it and not lose their traditional health knowledge and practices.